I stood in that empty chapel, staring at my husband's casket, and I knew right then that grief wasn't the worst thing that could happen to a person. Being abandoned in your grief, that's worse. Being invisible while you're breaking apart, that's the kind of pain that changes you forever. My name is Sarah, and I'm 42 years old. 3 weeks ago, I became a widow. But before I tell you about the funeral where I stood completely alone, before I tell you about the morning after that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life, I need you to understand who David was. Or who I thought he was. If you've ever loved someone so completely that losing them felt like losing your own heartbeat, then you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. And if you're watching this from wherever you are in the world, comment below and let me know, because I need you to know you're not alone in whatever darkness you're facing. Check the description box below for more stories like this one, stories about people who survived what felt unsurvivable. David Mitchell was 45 when he died. A sudden heart attack while he was out jogging, they said. One moment he was alive, checking his fitness watch, probably thinking about what he'd have for breakfast. The next moment, he was gone. Just gone. Like a light switching off. We'd been married for 17 years. 17 years of inside jokes and Sunday morning pancakes, and the way he'd always warm up my side of the bed before I got in on cold nights. 17 years of building a life together in our modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Connecticut. We didn't have children. We'd tried for years, spent thousands on treatments that never worked, and eventually made peace with being just the two of us. It was enough. He was enough. Or so I thought. The day he died, I remember the police officer's face when she came to the door. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I hadn't finished the laundry. I remember the way the afternoon sun was streaming through our kitchen window, hitting the coffee mugs we'd left in the sink that morning. His mug said, "World's okayest husband," a joke gift I'd given him years ago. Mine was plain white, chipped on one side. I didn't cry right away. Shocked as that to you? It wraps around you like a protective blanket, numbing everything until your brain can catch up to what your ears just heard. Your husband is dead. Those words don't make sense at first. They're just sounds, just syllables that couldn't possibly mean what they mean. The crying came later, in waves so violent I thought they might actually kill me too. I would wake up in the middle of the night reaching for him, forgetting for those first few merciful seconds that he was gone, then remembering, and dying all over again. But I wasn't alone in those first few days. Or at least, I thought I wasn't. David's family had always been complicated. His mother, Patricia, was one of those women who never thought anyone was good enough for her son. She lived 2 hours away in Massachusetts with David's father, Robert, and his younger sister, Jennifer. They'd been polite to me over the years, in that way that feels more like tolerance than acceptance. Holiday dinners were stilted affairs, where I always felt like a guest rather than family. But they were David's family, and he loved them, so I tried. When David died, I called Patricia first, right after the police left. My hands were shaking, so badly I could barely hold the phone. I remember her gasp, remember the way she kept saying, "No, no, no," over and over. Robert got on the phone and asked me practical questions in that detached way people do when they're trying not to fall apart. Jennifer didn't come to the phone at all. They said they'd come down for the funeral, of course. They said they'd help with arrangements. They said all the things people say when someone dies. Planning a funeral is like moving through a nightmare in slow motion. Every decision feels impossible. Casket or cremation? What music? What flowers? Open or closed casket? I chose a simple service at the chapel where we'd gotten married, the place where David had promised to love me until death did us part. I guess he kept that promise in the end. I picked out his suit, the navy one he'd worn to his best friend's wedding 2 years ago. I wrote his obituary, struggling over every word, trying to condense an entire human life into a few paragraphs. I chose photos for the memory board. In every single one, he was smiling. David had one of those faces that looked like it was made for smiling. During those days of planning, I'd call Patricia with updates. She always sounded distracted, distant. She'd say things like, "Whatever you think is best, dear," in a tone that didn't sound like she thought anything I did was best. But I told myself she was grieving. We all grieve differently. The funeral was set for a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after David died. I sent the details to his family, to his coworkers, to our small circle of friends. I printed programs. I ordered flowers, white roses, his favorite. I wrote a eulogy, even though I knew I'd never be able to get through it without breaking down. The day before the funeral, I called Patricia to confirm what time they'd be arriving. She answered on the 5th ring, and I could hear music and laughter in the background. Party sounds. "Oh, Sarah," she said, and something in her voice made my stomach drop. "I meant to call you. There's been a complication." A complication. That's what she called it. Jennifer's daughter, David's niece Emma, was turning 16 the same day as the funeral. They'd had the party planned for months, Patricia explained. Months. They'd rented a venue, hired a DJ, invited 100 people. They couldn't possibly cancel. "You're not coming," I said. It wasn't a question. "It's not that we don't want to be there," Patricia said, her voice taking on that defensive edge I knew so well. "But Emma's been looking forward to this for so long, and David would understand. He loved Emma. He'd want her to have her special day." I stood in my kitchen, holding that phone, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Something that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with a different kind of loss. "It's his funeral," I whispered. "And we'll have our own memorial for him here after the party," she said briskly. "A private family service. Actually, Sarah, that might be better anyway. More intimate. Just family. Just family." The words hung in the air like a slap. After 17 years of marriage, I was still not family. I don't remember what else was said. I think I just hung up. I sat at our kitchen table for hours, watching the sun set through the window, and I realized that I was going to bury my husband alone. The day of the funeral arrived with cruel sunshine. I'd imagined rain, dark clouds, whether that matched the devastation inside me. Instead, I got a perfect October day, the kind David used to love. The kind where he'd suggest we skip work and drive up to see the fall foliage. I got dressed alone. Navy dress, simple heels, pearls he'd given me for our 10th anniversary. My hands shook putting on my makeup. I kept having to stop and start over because tears would streak my mascara. In the mirror, I looked like a stranger. Hollow-eyed. Aged 10 years in 2 weeks. The chapel was ready when I arrived an hour early. White roses everywhere, just like I'd ordered. David's photo on an easel by the door, that picture from our vacation in Maine 3 years ago, wind in his hair, ocean behind him, that smile. God, that smile. I stood there looking at it until the funeral director gently touched my elbow and asked if I needed anything. What I needed was my husband back. What I needed was for his family to be there. What I needed was to not be standing in this chapel alone, drowning in white roses and the suffocating smell of sympathy. People started arriving. David's co-workers from the insurance company where he'd worked for 12 years. Our neighbors, the Hendersons, who used to invite us over for summer barbecues. A few friends we'd made over the years, people who'd known us as David and Sarah, always together, always a unit. They came up to me one by one, squeezing my hands, saying they were sorry, saying he was too young, saying all the useless things people say, because what else is there to say when someone's husband dies at 45? But every time the chapel door opened, my heart would leap, thinking maybe Patricia had changed her mind. Maybe they'd gotten in the car after the birthday party and driven down. Maybe they'd realized that a sweet 16 happens every year, but you only bury your son once. They never came. I kept checking my phone. Nothing. No text saying they were running late. No call with an apology. Nothing at all. Just pictures on Facebook. I'd looked. I couldn't help myself. Of Jennifer's daughter in a sparkly dress, blowing out candles on an elaborate cake. Patricia in the background, smiling. All of them smiling. The service started. I sat in the front pew alone. The pew that should have been filled with family was just me. One person. Behind me, I could hear whispers. I knew what people were thinking. Where's his family? Where's his mother? If you've ever been in a situation where you felt completely abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you, you know what I felt sitting in that pew. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was rage. It was humiliation. It was the horrible realization that the family I tried to be part of for 17 years had never truly accepted me, and now they couldn't even pretend. This might be hard to hear, but if you've made it this far, please hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be told. Your story needs to be told. And check the description for more stories about betrayal, survival, and justice. Because what happened next changed everything. The service was beautiful and horrible. David's boss gave a speech about what a dedicated employee he'd been. Our neighbor talked about how he'd always helped shovel their driveway in winter. I tried to read my eulogy but got through maybe 3 sentences before I broke down completely. The funeral director had to help me back to my seat. Through it all, I kept staring at that empty pew. David's family should have been sitting there. His mother, his father, his sister. They should have been there sharing this grief, this unbearable weight of loss. Instead, they were at a birthday party eating cake. After the service, we went to the cemetery. The day was still impossibly beautiful. Leaves were changing colors, bright reds and golds against blue sky. We stood around the grave, maybe 20 people, all of them kind, all of them practically strangers in the grand scheme of David's life. None of them blood. They lowered the casket. Someone handed me a white rose to throw onto it. I stood there, rose in hand, and I thought, this is it. This is the last moment. After this, he's just gone. And his family isn't even here to say goodbye. I threw the rose. It landed on the mahogany casket with a soft thud that I felt in my bones. People started drifting away after that, coming up to hug me one more time, telling me to call if I needed anything. Empty promises that felt kind but meant nothing. By the time the sun started its descent toward evening, I was alone again. Just me and the cemetery workers who were waiting to fill in the grave. I drove home in the car we bought together 4 years ago. His gym bag was still in the back seat from that last morning. I couldn't bring myself to move it. The house was dark when I pulled up. I'd left in such a rush that morning I'd forgotten to leave lights on. It looked abandoned. It felt abandoned. Inside, the silence was deafening. I walked through our home touching things. His jacket still hanging by the door, his reading glasses on the coffee table, his favorite coffee mug in the sink. All these pieces of a life that had just stopped. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, my bed now, I guess, staring at the ceiling, replaying the empty chapel in my mind. Replaying Patricia's voice saying, just family. Replaying every holiday, every family gathering over 17 years where I'd felt like an outsider but told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. They'd show me exactly what I was worth to them. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer, David's sister. My heart actually leaped. Finally, an apology, an explanation, something. I opened it. There was a photo, Emma in her party dress, surrounded by friends, Jennifer and Patricia on either side of her, all of them beaming. The caption read, "Best Sweet 16 ever. Emma is so blessed to be surrounded by family who loves her." Below the photo, "Hope David's service went okay. We were thinking of you, thinking of me." While they posed for pictures and ate cake and celebrated, they were thinking of me. I stared at that text for a long time, and that's when something inside me shifted. The grief was still there. God, it was crushing me, but underneath it now was something else. Something cold and sharp and clarifying. They'd chosen a birthday party over their son's funeral. They'd abandoned me in my darkest hour. And now they expected me to just accept it, to understand, to be grateful they'd been thinking of me. I fell asleep holding my phone. That photo burned into my mind. I dreamed of David, of him asking me why I was alone at his funeral. In the dream, I couldn't answer. I just kept crying, and he kept fading away until he was gone. When I woke up the next morning, everything was about to change. I woke up at dawn to someone pounding on my door. For a confused, half-asleep moment, I thought it was David. He'd forgotten his keys again, was locked out after his morning run, and this whole nightmare had just been a horrible dream. Then I remembered, and the grief crashed over me fresh and new, the way it would every morning for months to come. The pounding continued. I dragged myself out of bed, still in yesterday's funeral dress that I'd been too exhausted to take off. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a suit, mid-50s, tired eyes, holding a briefcase. For a terrible moment, I thought maybe something else had happened. More bad news. Is there even space for more bad news when your husband just died? I opened the door a crack. "Yes. Sarah Mitchell," he asked. When I nodded, he said, "My name is Thomas Bradshaw. I'm an attorney. I was your husband's attorney, actually. May I come in? I have some things we need to discuss." David had an attorney. In 17 years of marriage, He'd never mentioned anything about an attorney. We talked about getting wills made but never got around to it. We were too young for that, we'd always said. We had time. I let him in because I was too tired to do anything else. He sat on our couch, the one David and I had picked out together at a furniture store on a rainy Saturday 5 years ago, debating between gray and navy for 20 minutes before David made me laugh so hard I didn't care anymore, and we just bought the gray. Mr. Bradshaw opened his briefcase, pulling out files, official-looking documents with seals and signatures. Mrs. Mitchell, I apologize for coming so soon after the funeral. I know this is a difficult time, but there are some things you need to know and they can't wait. He spread the documents on our coffee table. Your husband came to see me about 8 months ago. He wanted to make arrangements. Legal and financial arrangements. 8 months ago. I tried to remember 8 months ago. That was February. Winter. We'd been planning a trip to Florida for spring break. David had been stressed about work, but he'd seemed fine. Normal. He'd been David. What kind of arrangements? I asked, my voice hoarse from yesterday's crying. Mr. Bradshaw's expression was careful, professional, but I saw sympathy in his eyes. The kind of sympathy that made my skin prickle with warning. Mrs. Mitchell, did you know your husband had a life insurance policy? Yes, I said. Through his work. It's not much. Maybe 50,000. We always meant to get more, but... I trailed off. But we thought we had time. That's not the policy I'm referring to, Mr. Bradshaw said quietly. Your husband took out a private policy 8 months ago. A substantial one. $2 million, Mrs. Mitchell. And you're the sole beneficiary. The room tilted. $2 million. That couldn't be right. We didn't have that kind of money. We lived comfortably but modestly. We drove used cars and shopped at Target and took vacations to state parks. There's more, Mr. Bradshaw continued. He pulled out another document. Your husband also changed the deed to this house. It was previously in both your names. 8 months ago, he had it changed to your name only. He also moved all of your joint savings and retirement accounts into accounts solely in your name. Mrs. Mitchell, in the last 8 months of his life, your husband systematically transferred every asset he had to you. I couldn't process this. It didn't make sense. Why would he do that? Mr. Bradshaw hesitated. Then he pulled out one more document. An envelope with my name on it, in David's handwriting. He left this letter with me, with instructions to give it to you after his death. He also left specific instructions about his will and his wishes regarding his family. My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. David's handwriting. His actual handwriting, from when he was alive, when he was still here. I pressed it against my chest for a moment, eyes closed, trying to feel him through the paper. Would you like me to step outside while you read it? Mr. Bradshaw asked gently. I nodded. Couldn't speak. He went out to his car, leaving me alone with my dead husband's letter. I sat there for a full 10 minutes before I could bring myself to open it. When I finally did, David's words hit me like a physical blow. My dearest Sarah, asterisk if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for what I'm about to tell you. I'm sorry for every lie and every secret I kept. Asterisk. Asterisk I've been sick for over a year. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me 6 months to a year. I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to watch you suffer through watching me die. I know that was selfish. I know you deserve to know. But Sarah, you've been through so much already with the infertility and the failed treatments and the grief of the children we never had. I couldn't do it. I couldn't tell you and watch the light go out of your eyes every single day. Asterisk. Asterisk, so I lied. I told you I was fine. I hid the doctor appointments. I hid the pain. I hid everything. And I made arrangements. Asterisk. Asterisk, the heart attack was a gift in a way. Quick. Painless for you. Better than what was coming. Asterisk. The letter kept going, but I had to stop. I was crying so hard I couldn't see. David had been dying. For over a year, he'd been dying, and I'd had no idea. All those times he'd seemed tired, those headaches he'd dismissed, that weight he'd been losing that he'd blamed on stress, it had all been cancer. He'd been dying, and he'd faced it alone, so I wouldn't have to. I forced myself to keep reading. Asterisk, I've left you everything, Sarah. Everything I had, everything I could give you. The insurance policy, the house, all of it. You deserve security. You deserve a life after me, asterisk. Asterisk, but there's something else you need to know. Something about my family, asterisk. Asterisk, my mother called me 6 months ago. She asked for money. A lot of money. Said they were in financial trouble, that they might lose their house. I was already sick by then, already knowing I was dying. And I told her no, asterisk. Asterisk, I told her no, because I'd been giving them money for years, Sarah. Thousands and thousands of dollars over the course of our marriage. Money I told you went to retirement savings or emergency funds. Money that actually went to bail out my father's failed business ventures and my sister's credit card debt and my mother's shopping habits. Asterisk. Asterisk, they bled us dry, and they were never grateful. They were never satisfied. And when I finally said no, when I told them I was sick and I needed to take care of you instead, my mother said something I'll never forget. She said, "You'd choose that woman over your own family?" Asterisk. Asterisk, that woman. After 17 years, that's what you were to her. And I realized I'd enabled it. I'd let them treat you like an outsider while I played the dutiful son. I'd chosen them over you again and again, even when I knew better. Asterisk. Asterisk, so I made a choice. I put everything in your name where they can't touch it. I wrote a will that specifically excludes them from any inheritance. And I made sure you'd be taken care of after I'm gone, asterisk. Asterisk, they're going to be angry, Sarah. When they find out, they're going to come for you. They're going to say terrible things. They're going to claim I wasn't in my right mind, that you manipulated me, asterisk. Asterisk, don't let them. You deserve every penny. You earned it by loving me unconditionally for 17 years. By being the family they never were, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more when I was alive. I'm sorry I let them hurt you. I'm sorry for all of it, asterisk. But I'm not sorry for making sure you're protected now. Asterisk, I love you, Sarah. I loved you from the moment I met you until my last breath. Whatever happens next, know that, asterisk. Yours always, David. I sat on that couch and I cried until there was nothing left inside me. David had known he was dying. He'd protected me even from that knowledge. And he'd made sure his family, the family who'd chosen a birthday party over his funeral, couldn't touch what he'd left for me. Mr. Bradshaw came back inside after a while. He sat quietly while I composed myself enough to speak. They don't know yet, he said, about the will, the insurance, any of it. But they will soon. Estate matters become public. And Mrs. Mitchell, he looked at me seriously. Your husband was right. They're going to fight this. Be prepared. I thought about the empty chapel, the birthday party, Patricia's voice saying, just family. Let them fight, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was. Let them come. Because here's what I'd learned in the past 24 hours. Grief can coexist with rage. Love can coexist with justice. And sometimes the greatest act of love is making sure the people who hurt you can never do it again. They came 3 days later. All of them. Patricia, Robert, and Jennifer. They didn't call first. They just showed up, standing on the porch of the house that was now solely mine, looking at me like I'd stolen something that belonged to them. Patricia's face was pinched, her makeup severe. Sarah, we need to talk. I almost laughed. After everything, now they wanted to talk. But I stepped aside and let them in because I wanted to see their faces when they realized what David had done. They arranged themselves in my living room like they owned it. Patricia in the armchair, Robert and Jennifer on the couch. I remained standing. I wasn't going to sit with them like this was a friendly visit. We've heard some disturbing things, Patricia began, her voice tight. About David's will. About insurance policies and financial arrangements. Have you, I said. Not a question. Sarah, we know you're grieving, Jennifer cut in, her tone dripping with false sympathy. We all are. But David wouldn't have wanted to leave his family with nothing. He loved us. So if there's been some mistake with the paperwork, we can fix it together. The audacity, the sheer audacity of sitting in my living room after missing their son's funeral for a birthday party and suggesting I'd somehow manipulated David into leaving them out of his will. There's no mistake, I said calmly. David knew exactly what he was doing. Patricia's face flushed red. That's impossible. David would never cut out his own mother. Unless. She looked at me with such venom it was like being struck. Unless someone convinced him to. Unless someone poisoned him against his own family. I'd wondered how long it would take them to blame me. Turns out about 3 minutes. You want to know why David left you nothing? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Ask yourselves where you were when we buried him. The room went silent. Jennifer looked away. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. But Patricia just raised her chin defiantly. Emma's party was planned for months. We couldn't just cancel. Your son's funeral, I interrupted. You chose a birthday party over your son's funeral. A birthday that happens every single year. A son you'll never bury again. Don't you dare judge us, Patricia hissed. You have no idea what we've been through. Do you know how much David gave us over the years? How he helped us? We deserved more than what he left us. And there it was. The truth underneath all the false sympathy and the accusations. They thought they deserved David's money. They felt entitled to it because he'd been supporting them for years without my knowledge. Did you know he was sick? I asked suddenly. David, did you know he had cancer? Their faces told me they didn't. Patricia's anger flickered, replaced momentarily by confusion. What? Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. For over a year. He was dying, and he didn't tell me because he wanted to protect me from the pain of watching it happen. I looked at each of them in turn. He didn't tell you either, apparently. But then again, when was the last time any of you asked him how he really was? When was the last time you cared about him rather than what he could do for you? That's not fair, Jennifer said, but her voice was weak. You want to talk about fair? David worked himself to exhaustion to support not just me, but all of you. He gave you money we needed for our own future because you asked. Because he loved you. And when he finally said no, when he was dying and needed to make sure I was taken care of, your mother, I pointed at Patricia, called me that woman. After 17 years of marriage. That woman. Patricia's face had gone pale. He told you that. He wrote it in a letter. A letter he left with his attorney, along with very specific instructions about his will. Instructions that make it very clear he knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. I pulled out Mr. Bradshaw's card and set it on the coffee table. His name is Thomas Bradshaw. You're welcome to contest the will. You're welcome to try to prove your son wasn't of sound mind when he made legal arrangements 8 months before he died. But I should tell you, David documented everything. Every loan you never paid back. Every time he asked you to come visit and you were too busy. Every holiday where you made me feel like an intruder in what was supposed to be my own family. Robert stood up slowly. He looked older suddenly, tired. Sarah, we never meant. You never meant what? I asked. You never meant to treat me like I wasn't good enough? You never meant to bleed your son dry financially? You never meant to skip his funeral? He had no answer. None of them did. I think you should leave, I said. They left. Patricia was still sputtering protests, threatening legal action, but Robert and Jennifer practically dragged her out. I closed the door behind them and locked it, then slid down to sit on the floor with my back against it. I waited to feel guilty. Waited to feel bad for throwing their cruelty back in their faces. But all I felt was exhausted. And maybe, underneath the exhaustion, a small spark of something that might eventually become peace. Over the next few weeks, I learned to live in my grief and my anger simultaneously. They did try to contest the will. Mr. Bradshaw had been right about that. But David's documentation was thorough. Bank statements, emails, even a video he'd recorded 8 months before explaining his decisions in his own words. The video was the hardest thing I'd ever watched. David, already thinner than I remembered him, already sick though I hadn't known it then, looking into a camera and saying, Sarah deserves everything I'm leaving her. She was my true family, the only one who loved me without conditions. I watched it alone in our bedroom, my bedroom, and I cried for the man who'd loved me enough to protect me even after death. Who'd faced his mortality alone, so I wouldn't have to watch him suffer. Who'd made sure his family couldn't hurt me anymore. The legal battle lasted 3 months. In the end, David's will stood. Patricia, Robert, and Jennifer got nothing except their own bitterness and the knowledge that their choices had cost them more than money. It had cost them their son's love and respect in his final days. The insurance money came through. $2 million. An impossible sum that David had somehow scraped together in those last months by doubling his life insurance, taking out additional policies, making sure I'd never have to worry. I put most of it in investments and savings. Some I donated to pancreatic cancer research in David's name. And some, a small portion, I used to throw Emma, my niece who I'd never been allowed to get close to, the most elaborate 18th birthday party you could imagine. I sent the invitation to Jennifer with a note. David would have wanted Emma to celebrate, and family should be there for family. She didn't respond. None of them came to the party. But Emma did. She came, and she cried, and she told me she was sorry. That she'd been too young to understand that she should have insisted they all come to the funeral. That her sweet 16 had been ruined anyway because all she could think about was Uncle David not being there to see it. I forgave her because she was a child caught in adult cruelty, and because David would have wanted me to. A year has passed now since I stood alone in that chapel. The grief is still there. I don't think it'll ever fully leave. There are still mornings when I wake up reaching for him. Still moments when I want to tell him something, and the reality of his absence crashes over me all over again. But I'm not alone anymore. Not really. I've made new friends. Found a grief support group where everyone understands what it's like to lose someone too young. Started volunteering at a hospice because if David had to face his death without me, maybe I could be there for other people facing theirs. And I've learned something important. Betrayal teaches you who people really are. Grief strips away all the pretense and reveals the truth underneath. David's family showed me their truth when they chose a party over a funeral. David showed me his truth by making sure I'd be okay without him. The house is quieter now. Some days that's painful. Other days it feels peaceful. I've redecorated, not to erase David, but to make it a space that's mine. His photos are still everywhere. I talk to them sometimes. Tell him about my day, about the sunset I saw, or the book I'm reading. I don't hate his family anymore. Hate takes energy I don't want to spend. But I don't forgive them either. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Some abandonments are too cruel to excuse. What I have instead is clarity. I know who I am. I know what I survived. And I know that David's last act of love was making sure the people who'd hurt us both couldn't hurt me anymore. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you. Thank you for bearing witness to my grief and my rage and my journey to something that might eventually look like healing. If you've ever been betrayed by people who should have loved you, if you've ever stood alone when you shouldn't have had to, I see you. Your pain is valid. Your anger is justified. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well despite everything they did to you. It's protecting yourself the way David protected me. It's choosing yourself when everyone else has chosen themselves. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about survival and betrayal, and the complicated ways we love and lose. Stories that remind us we're not alone in the darkness. I stood alone at my husband's funeral, but I'm not standing alone anymore.